Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a walkthrough of the 7-inch display for the Abarth 595 Competizione. These are the main 7 sections along the bottom. We'll be going through each one of these step by step, starting with radio. So we can start by going through FM, AM or digital. Along the top here you can set preset sort of stations. Select whichever ones are your favourite, and as you can see I've got BBC Radio 1, Capital, Classic and Jazz FM. Obviously you've got the volume slider here. You can also go forwards and backwards. You can do a individual search. When we get into this search section, you can go by all of them, or you can go by certain presets, or you can go by genre. These are the presets which you can set manually. Different things, and then you can search by alphabetical order here by just clicking that button there. We continue scrolling down and you can see you have all the varied stations that you could possibly want. As you can see, the display is relatively responsive, and I'd say it's not bad. It's not bad out of all the car displays that are out there. It feels similar to what you'd get on a phone, but not quite as slick, and we'll get back to that later when I get on to Apple CarPlay. Now we move on to media. Now if we go into media here, it will say connected device, and you can do that via Bluetooth or USB. As you can see here, I don't currently have either connected. My phone would usually be connected by Bluetooth. However, you can also use a USB. This section is relatively self-explanatory. Once you plug your phone in, the music will start playing as it does in any other vehicle, and the same goes for Bluetooth. And now if we go into the audio section within media, this is where you can get to this through the settings as well. This is where you can edit where you actually want the balance of the audio to be within the car. As you can see, you can change the position of that, and I'd say that's relatively standard in most audio systems these days. So as you can see, we can change the position. We can get into equalizer where we can change the treble, the mid and the bass. So we can add as much as that as you want. Autoplay, this is what I was talking about before. You can choose for USB devices to automatically play media when plugged in. You can turn that on or off. And the same goes for radio. I have that off, but as I mentioned, you can have it on when you turn on the car, or you can have it come up with what you had on playing last. Here's navigation. We go through to navigation now. So this car has a nav built in. So this system uses TomTom, and that's got built in. I think it is an added extra. I don't think you by default get the nav with the 7-inch display unless that's changed, but that was an added extra. As you can see, it just uses, if you're familiar with a TomTom sat nav, it uses a very similar experience to that. You can pinch to zoom, you can use the in and outs, you can select your current location. There's a whole load of other stuff you can do here. Now, I'm not too familiar with it as I don't really tend to use it very much, but obviously you can search for a location that you want to go for. You have your places, so you can put home, you can put work, you can put other places in there, so you sort of quickly select it. It tells you where the nearest parking places are in your surrounding area. We go across here. It tells you where petrol stations, it can tell you the weather, other TomTom services, and then we just get into settings here. Now, generally speaking, the reason I don't tend to use nav too much is because when we get to Apple CarPlay, which I'll get to in a bit, we'll see that generally we can use Google Maps or Apple Maps, and that will be the same for Android Auto as well. Let's have a look at UConnect. Here we have a lot of the settings within the car. So as we can see here, that's audio settings. We looked at this earlier. Media, we looked at it earlier. Settings, so we'll get to this in a second. Nav, radio, phone, compass, trip. This basically just gives you an overall of everything, and then you've got UConnect Live, which you can actually log in and sign up to their services or whatnot. Generally, I found that didn't do too much before. You've got a fancy compass on here if you want it. So let's go through to settings. Obviously, you've got language select. If we then go into display, you've got display mode. You can basically have it as auto, so it automatically adjusts the brightness depending on the brightness within the car. You've also got headlights, which are all automatic. If we switch that to manual, then you'll be able to change the brightness of the certain lights within the certain times of the day. Generally, I leave that on auto. Okay, if we go into units, we can see that I've currently got Imperial selected. However, you can also change that to metric, and you can even do a custom balance between the two if that suits your fancy. So I have got a voice assistant in this car. Generally, once again, it's not a system that I use because of Siri with CarPlay. But if we go over to the steering wheel and we press the tune to DAB radio 1.
Tuning to DAB radio.
That's generally how the voice assistant works. It will just come up with a little message up here, and generally these little messages up here, you've got the temperature, you've got the time, and it will always tell you sort of what's going on around here. We then scroll down, and this is brought us a whole nother section. Date and time, self-explanatory. You can change the format, you can sync it with the GPS, which is what I do. Safety and assistance. This is talking about your rain sensing wipers. So the sensitivity of which the automatic windscreen wiper sensors will actually come into effect. I've got it on 3. I think it's something more that you have to play around with yourself to see what the difference is. So this is where you have your headlight sensitivity. And this is also where you can choose to have daylight running lights on or off. I currently have them off. It's just a personal preference thing. Doors and locks, you've got auto lock doors. That's pretty much the only option we have here. Engine off options, so this is where you can choose to have your radio off, delay or not. It goes back to exactly the same audio section as prior. Phone and Bluetooth, this is where you can set up your device. You can turn on Do Not Disturb at certain times. And also this is where you can choose to pair devices. This is where you'll go to paired phones, where you can add a device and go through the pairing process. Within radio setup, we can choose traffic announcements, DAB announcements, alternative frequencies, and you can go to regional channels as well. If we go on restore default settings, this will change everything back to default as it was when you got the car when it was new. I suppose that's good if you're going to be moving on, selling the car or whatever, or something's gone wrong, you need to set it. Clearing personal data, once again, relatively self-explanatory. Restoring apps, again, this is just going through the process of restoring the vehicle. But as you can see, the general responsiveness of the display is pretty good. So now if we get onto trip, it will give you a general trip info here. Then you have trip A and trip B. Now you can see that I've had these trips going for quite some time and these are actually identical even though they're different. You hold down on a select trip to reset it. So here we've got a mute, as you can see, just by tapping that, we mute everything. This isn't actually part of the display. These are just always here, these buttons, they're never gonna change. If the screen is distracting you, you can kind of briefly turn it off. It's still on, but it's not actually on. You get what I mean? It's just dimmed the display. Here we've got a back button, which to be honest, I never really ended up using, but if you're within certain settings, you can hit that back button and it will just send you right back. On the side here, we also can get straight to the map within radio. Info, it'll tell you more info on the actual station itself. We get rid of that. You also have a tuning scroll on this side. If you want to quickly flip through all the different radio stations without having to individually go to the browse section. If we press on that, it also brings us to all of the channels and we can scroll through like this. You see, if you click on the clock, it asks if you want to change the clock settings. And that is generally about it.